Hey everybody, it's Francis, and I want to welcome you to the new What a Hell of a Way to Dad podcast. All of the same content that you've been enjoying, but Nate and I have not been in the military for multiple years at this point, and we've decided that what we really want to talk about is parenting. So you're going to still get a lot of the same great content. Patreon is still going to have all of our bonus episodes, all of the old bonus episodes, 8 years of bonus content is still there. $5 a month gets you access to all of that, and you will continue to get 3 episodes a month going beyond that. We've got our ongoing Deadliest Warrior series that we're running. We have a MASHcast that I do with Carrie. We have a lot of really great stuff over there, so if you like what you're hearing here and you want to hear a little bit more, patreon.com/hellofawaytodie is where to find all of that. You can also check out our store, whatahellofawaytodad.com. It has all the things from our old store, but also it's got a few new sections. It's got an apparel section, it's got the podcast attic, and it has art and handmade stuff. So give it a look. whatahellofawaytodad.com. Find yourself something new. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show.
Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. He ain't gonna jump no more.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of What a Hell of a Way to Dad. It's Francis, and with me today I have Jason Pargin, author extraordinaire, writer from crack.com. Jason, how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. As we record this, we are on the cusp of the election, so all of my media and every screen I have is full of election stuff. This is a uniquely bad time of year and life, but I'm managing. I'm trying.
Well, and that's a very interesting thing for you to jump onto, because your most recent book, I'm beginning to worry about this big black box of doom, kind of has that same motif to it, doesn't it? And I said this earlier, I've been following your writing since you were an editor on Cracked. Your Monkey Sphere article has always stuck with me since I read it. So, and you have a interesting way of kind of adding a little bit of philosophy into your writings as well, with the John Dies at the End series, with your Zoe Ash series. But this new book is a little bit different because it's not it's not this cosmic horror genre that some of your stuff might fall into. And it's about, the inner workings of ourselves online. And so, as I read this book and going through it and really rethinking the way that I present myself online and the way that I interact with people online, and how I've been doing this for the last 25 years. My first question, Jason, how dare you? How dare you do this to me?
Yeah, so the book is called I'm Starting to Worry About This Black Box of Doom. And I do want to emphasize, it is not about the election or any election. It is about the general miasma of anxiety that comes with existing in this media ecosystem. So, God willing, the book will still make sense regardless of who wins the election in a couple of weeks. So it ties into that, in that this environment is the soil from which our political system, as we have right now, has grown. But it's not specifically about, like, this book, I don't think has the word Trump anywhere in it. It's something that is bigger than that. But the setup is just that the plot is basically framed as a ticking clock thriller, where there's this rumor that goes around on the internet that a domestic terror attack on the Capitol is in progress and that the authorities are not taking it seriously. So you have just a bunch of random citizens against the clock trying to figure out what's true, what's false, and to get to the answer before what they believe is a weapon of mass destruction reaching the Capitol. And this goes exactly as badly as you would expect, especially if you have ever tried to track a big news event as it unfolds on Twitter or on TikTok, God forbid, any of those platforms. If you've watched how quickly the misinformation starts to cloud the picture and how quickly grifters come in and try to come up with fake stories. This is about a bunch of people, some of them well-meaning, some not, trying to sift through that in order to, they believe, save the world. And it becomes a, spoiler, just a carnival of ridiculous disasters.
Yes. And I do, when I watched the book trailer that you had for this, and it starts with the concept of, if somebody says, I need you to drop everything that you're doing right now and drive me and this box across the country, no questions asked, you can't look into the box, I'll pay you $200,000 if we can make it to Washington, D.C. at this particular time. And it is this perfect setup to say, okay, what is happening? Because again, I've read all of your other books, and I came into this with no expectations because I didn't want to read anything about it. The closest I got was reading, I think, Soren Bowie talking about it on his Twitter, saying, fuck you, Jason, for making me rethink the ways that I have to present myself online. And so I wanted to go in this without really knowing anything about it. And you have this perfect setup of just like, okay, yes, something could be happening here. But as insiders on this, as we are not the ones who are online on Reddit, we're the ones who are following the characters. You still manage to maintain this like mystery about what actually is in there, not just with the rumors that are circulating about a dirty bomb, but even the people who are next to it are saying, well, maybe it could be a dirty bomb. There could be this issue. Like they're getting taken in by the entire thing themselves. And look, you add a box that hey, here's a box, you can't look into it. And for 4 days, you have to drive me across the country with it. I'm also going to think that that's a dirty bomb, right? Like who does that?
Or that it's drugs or a dead body or something. Because, the one thing that is clear in the story, there is something in the box. There's something significant in the box. So what you see is a whole bunch of different people trying to, and you can see this as symbolism if you want, but they're trying to get an answer based on very limited information. And when you have this vacuum of information, other stuff comes in to fill it. And that's kind of the way the media ecosystem works. The one thing that a person will not do, the one thing that the audience will not do, is just sit with the uncertainty and wait to hear. So here you have a case where the question is very simple. What is in this box? What has motivated this person to spend this much money to move it secretly across the country? And when this starts, there's no real way to know, and people desperately want to know. And that is how you build a misinformation machine, because now there's incentive, financial and otherwise, to come in and try to fill in a story, an answer, to give people an answer that they are desperate to have. Whether or not it is true is largely irrelevant right up to the end. Because as we have seen, because, for example, the last big story I tried to follow online was the Trump assassination attempt. So immediately...
Which one?
Yeah, the first one, the big one. They had the photo that came with it. And so immediately people start trying to track down, posting screen grabs. This is our assassin. I think it's this guy. Here's his name. Here's his Facebook. Because they see like the hat on the guy and like, wait, we found a similar hat and this guy's a registered Democrat, blah, blah, blah. And immediately it turns out that's not the guy. Even months later, people will still be insisting that's the guy. Because the fact that eventually you do have an answer, that you do have, a dead guy identified by the authorities, it kind of doesn't matter in terms of your engagement. Like the people who put the bad information out there are really not punished for it. And there's really no incentive to not just jump on some narrative, because the algorithm does not favor the truth. It favors engagement. And a lot of times a fake story is going to be more engaging than the truth, for the same reason that a candy bar tastes better than an apple. One of them was specifically designed for a human to eat. The other one is designed for a tree to spread its seeds. So the truth often in this environment cannot compete with a very fun narrative unless the people running the platforms force the issue. Like they ban the people who put the fake story out there, but they also don't have any motivation to do that. So with this book, you're kind of watching a piece of information travel through this weird hall of mirrors and try to come out the other end intact.
And I want to part of this narrative, you focus really hard on Reddit, and I used to be on Reddit a lot. And I know like social media doesn't like they're all misinformation mills regardless. Twitter, TikTok, to an extent Facebook as well. Why is it Reddit that you kind of honed in on for this one?
I think of all of the platforms, Reddit is the one that is probably the least talked about and understood in terms of a vector, not just necessarily of misinformation, but in terms of where narratives are shaped. Because I could watch when Donald Trump was on the rise in 2015, going into 2016, you had people don't realize how much of the grassroots stuff was starting on 4chan and then taking root on Reddit. There was a bunch of like right-wing Reddits that were created, some of which have since been banned. But there they kind of developed, here's the most powerful version of his message that will get young men to pay attention and will like, here's the best version of the narrative. And you could watch them develop it in real time. So they're on TikTok and a lot of these platforms, they're not good discussion spaces because you can have a TikTok video and then you can have a bunch of comments with like 50,000 comments, but it's not a single space where you can organize a back and forth in a discussion or a debate. There's not that many of those places left because Twitter definitely doesn't lend itself to that. But Reddit is in the style of what used to be the old message boards and BBS systems back in the early days, where you have a permanent, like a bunch of members and a permanent record of a conversation. And where in terms of like trying to shape an idea, that's where it happens. And it's a very large user base of tens of millions, but it's also a user base of people who are extremely online, a little higher educated than the average person. And all of what used to be this ecosystem of message boards that used to be kind of the beating heart of the internet and of how people thought is now just all consolidated under one gigantic message board. And that's Reddit. But I think when you hear people talk about like, you know, we've got to control misinformation on Twitter /X or on Facebook or whatever, I rarely hear Reddit brought up. I think it is more important than what people think. Because among people who are just very passionate about tracking these stories and getting information out there and arguing about it, Reddit seems to be where they all land.
Yes, and I famously remember the Boston Marathon bombing when Reddit went into high gear of finding the people, and they found one guy who wasn't near there at all, and I think had died a month beforehand.
He had died, yeah. He was not alive, yeah.
Right, and it was just this constantly, because I'm back and forth with Reddit. We were recently looking for a new washing machine because our washing machine is slowly dying, and my wife went on to Reddit because that's, in some ways, you know that like if I go onto Reddit, I'm going to find that person who's a washing machine repair person, and they know everything that they need to know about it, and they're going to give me all the information that I need. And that's like one of the benefits, the positive things that Reddit has going for it, is that you can have this like hyper-specific space where you can talk about these things. I'm a member of a subreddit called Shed It, where everybody builds sheds. It's all about the sheds that they build and how should they be doing the insides, how should they be doing the bases and everything. And it's a very nice little community. And then also right next to it is these massive rumor mills that want to constantly churn this kind of thing out. And when you started doing your the book information, doing Ask Me Anythings, you created a subreddit, the Abaddon's Navigator, which was the subreddit that's created in your book.
Yeah, I did not create it. A reader created it.
Okay. Well, but it was created, and it becomes this little space that is just for your book. And just scrolling through it, it's, little things like one of your characters really likes to watch a live feed of trucks running into low bridges, which is also a guilty pleasure of mine. And, here you posted about a compilation of those trucks happening. You can get hyper specific. You can have something that is just for this book and to kind of talk about this book. And in some ways, I like that you can do that, but in some ways it also kind of creates maybe it's good or bad that it creates something that's a little bit more disposable. Because, once your next book comes out, and unless you're continuing this book series, you're not going to really have not continue this subreddit for it. Maybe make one for John Dies at the End if you're going to do another one of those. So I appreciate Reddit for what it can do, but also definitely seeing where there are issues with it, especially with the way that we all interact with people on social media.
If there's anybody out there who actually doubts the importance of Reddit or thinks that we're exaggerating or has never heard of it, try this. Go to Google and start to type any question about whatever. Like if the car you're driving, if they've done a recall, if it's like, 2019 Toyota Camry recall, when you start to type it, it will auto suggest Reddit as part of the search, because these days, because Google search has become unusable with the AI summaries and with SEO spam, if you add the word Reddit to the end of your question, you will get somebody on Reddit actually answering your question. It is an invaluable repository of knowledge where no matter how obscure, if you find a strangely shaped object in your backyard and you don't know what it is, and it's something that fell out of the sky and you think it fell off of an airplane or something, you can go on Reddit, load a picture and say, what is this thing? Somebody there will know.
Yeah, there's subreddits dedicated to what is this thing.
You'll literally have a guy saying, hey, I fly a Cessna crop duster. That's like the cap on one of the landing gear. It fell off of probably a guy there's such a vast reach of people with incredibly specific knowledge. That is the issue, because you're not going to necessarily hear from somebody whose credentials they will have a username like AssBlaster765, and they're like, oh yeah, I want to let you know I've been doing this for 20 years. What you've got, the model of thing you've got in your house. I can tell you that they actually, if you look on the serial number, those were manufactured at this facility because I was a manager there. It's so hyper specific and so useful that it has replaced Google for a lot of people, or has become the useful version of Google, that what Google used to be in its useful days. So when in that same space, you can find an entire subreddit of vaccine conspiracy theories or whatever, you're in a space where you're used to finding out true information. And again, the Boston Marathon thing where they tried to, look up the wrong guy. The reason people will go there is because actual journalists and actual news organizations, they have this thing where they are supposed to wait until they know something is true before they report it. So these online ecosystems will always be first, including having the true, like they will have the name of the assassin from that Trump situation. They did have that before you saw it in the New York Times or CNN, because they don't wait for a second verification. Like it leaked online and then they have it. And then, so it is very addictive to be in those spaces instead of refreshing the New York Times front page, because you're going to know hours or days before that does, because the latter actually has to verify that it's true. So it is very, very difficult to tell people, well, just stay out of the spaces because it's full of misinformation. It's like, yeah, it is, but it's also the first place to find out the truth in almost any case. It's just that if you're not extremely knowledgeable and conscientious and experienced in terms of how you filter that platform, you can fall down a rabbit hole very easily, because you can have a subreddit dedicated to whatever supposed vaccine deaths, the thing where they claim, vaccines cause heart attacks or whatever the thing was. There will be an admin there that only allows news stories that make it look like vaccines cause heart attacks. And if you try to submit any news story or any study saying otherwise, they will simply ban you. Because the way subreddit works, there's not an admin that runs the whole thing. Each subreddit has their own person and they get to set the rules. So you can find yourself in a silo where no opposing, like just by rule, no opposing information will come in, and they don't need to make anything up. They can they're just linking to other, and the fact that the sources they're linking are either misleading or leaving out part of the truth or whatever, it will not be apparent unless you are just very careful about how you read it and about trying to, look in other places. But it is like so many of these other platforms, it's like a funnel designed to like suck you down a specific pipeline to make you believe a specific thing.
Yep, that's the whole point. To fire up the algorithmics and get more. The more that you're online, the more ads are going to be served to you, is what it all comes down to. And there is that fear of missing out, but also the fear of getting some information and being wrong. And unfortunately, people don't really have that shame anymore to be like, oh shit, I was wrong, I should apologize. It's just I was wrong, whatever. We'll just move on from that, and nobody'll talk about it. Something else that comes up in this book is also Abbot's own the way that he interacts with people online as well. Just not even outside of the online rumor mill, before the events in the book take place, there's conversations between him and Ether about the way that he presents himself online and the absolute just unnecessary arguments that happen and that people will get legitimately mad about. The one that stood out for me is Abbot saying, getting into it because somebody said that Hitler was a pedophile because Eva Braun was 17 when he got with her. And so, his argument is like, well, no, that's not what a pedophile is. And, it boils down to, we should hate Hitler, obviously, because Hitler was Hitler. But, you shouldn't argue. You shouldn't have this. We shouldn't be calling him a pedophile. We should be hating him for the things that matter. And in the end, it doesn't fucking matter. In the end, you're still the guy defending Hitler for no reason. Nothing that person on Twitter or Reddit who says Hitler was a pedophile because X, Y, and Z, no history books are being rewritten here. It's just a guy posting and then you getting mad at the guy posting. And now you're just two people having an argument about a dude from 80 years ago who was a huge shithead anyway. And I feel like, a lot of arguments online are in that same vein of like, why are you wasting your time with this? There's no reason for any of this. That person posted some sort of bait online and you took it. And the self-righteousness that Abbot feels, like, no, it's okay that I'm doing this. It's okay I'm having these arguments because somebody needs to tell the truth. And even himself, it's like, you're not telling any kind of truth. So I wanted to kind of get an understanding of, we have this overall theme of of making sure that we cite our sources better online and not just being taken in by any of the hype that comes on, but also just how we interact with one another. And so why is that also in here as well?
Well, you will get a picture of a guy. And for people who have not read the book yet, Abbot he's the driver of the vehicle who's been approached by a stranger, a woman asking him to transport this box basically across the country from outside LA to Washington, D.C. And you find out as time goes on, he is an extremely online. He's a streamer who has like a few dozen fans. He's one of those guys who's kind of aspires to do that because he, in his case, kind of can't think of any other skills that he actually has. He's a guy in his 20s, but he's late enough into his 20s that the panic is starting to set in that, wait a second, maybe I'm not made to do anything in this system. Maybe I'm a spare part in your box of IKEA furniture that once you've put it together, you realize this is just an extra screw. It didn't maybe
I don't
I'm
need
just
this cog.
Maybe I don't fit into this machinery. So you see him pursuing a lot of behaviors that I think a lot of people pursue, where he is clearly trying to feel something. And one way that he clearly does it is by arguing with people. And he finds himself in spaces where that's what people do. They invent things to argue about, because obviously the purpose of disagreement and argument is for you to arrive at some sort of consensus or a truth or an action. Like, that exists for a reason. Disagreement is good. Disagreement in an organization is, if you're in an organization where everybody disagrees or everybody agrees all the time, or if you're in a society where everybody agrees all the time, you're just in a cult. You have people who are not able to think for themselves. Disagreement and argument is good. It means that people are actually trying to think for themselves and trying to make sure they've arrived at some kind of truth. But in these spaces, the motivation of the people who run the platforms is not for you to arrive at some kind of a truth or a consensus. Their motivation is to keep you online and logged in forever, all day. They are fighting for your time. So the point that that example is making is that all of these arguments people have, and especially where they've said something that's specifically intended to be bait, it's not intended to make you any smarter or to help you organize your thoughts or anything else. They only care about how long were they able to keep you staring at the app or keep you looking at ads or keep you staring at the screen. That's it. So you have an ecosystem where you're arguing about things where the thing you're arguing about is not real. So right now, somewhere on Reddit, on 4chan, on pick your platform, there are people bitterly arguing about a case where some school has allowed children to identify as cats, and so they have boxes of kitty litter in the classroom for the kids to use because they're allowed to identify as cats. A thing that has not occurred, but they are bitterly arguing about the details of this thing that didn't happen because the platform doesn't care. It only cares, are you looking at the screen and typing things? And that's what, on a lot of these spaces, that's what they found is effective. So I can go on Twitter right now and find some tweet with, 80,000 quote tweets and however many tens of thousands of replies where it's saying something like, ladies, if your boyfriend doesn't have a beard, you have a girlfriend, not a boyfriend. And then it's all these people screaming at that person where it's like, that's not even a real opinion that person probably has. Mm-hmm. People are bitterly yelling back and forth over just a random thing they said because they knew it would get a bunch of replies and to make like $4 in revenue off of Twitter's program where if you're verified, you can get paid some trivial amount of money, doing it for just not even enough money to buy a hamburger.
Right.
Because ultimately that's what Twitter also wants. As long as people are replying and quote tweeting or whatever, that's all that matters. But the percentage of those conversations that are useful or leading you towards some sort of a helpful conclusion or anything else is very small. The signal to noise ratio is shocking because the noise is profitable.
Yeah. And I was thinking about this last night about how and I'm going to admit this online for everybody to hear. I thought that the TV show The Big Bang Theory is fine. I've seen, my wife and I watched every episode. We binged it a few years ago. I think a lot of it's cute. A lot of it's fun. It's got funny cameos in it and everything. However, if you post that online, that you don't think that The Big Bang Theory, a TV show that was wildly popular, like outside of the internet, outside of Twitter, very popular TV show, I will get lambasted for something like this. How it's, my favorite one is nerd blackface. I think is one that I heard one time, which was an absolute new one on me. And if I did post that, people would argue, and don't, if you're thinking about sending me a message, I don't care. Because again, nothing changes here. You can yell at me all you want. You can show me things about how you have opinions about this, but it doesn't matter. Like, that argument doesn't have to happen. And all we're doing is giving, if we're on Twitter, we're just giving Elon Musk more money, going back and forth with this on the internet, just so that more ads can be served in front of all of us. And those kinds of things, if I see somebody who talks shit on The Big Bang Theory, I look at that tweet and I say, okay, and I move on, because I don't care enough to have that argument with somebody. It's not going to change my opinion, but I know that it feels good. And that's the problem. I have not always been a 41-year-old dad online. I used to be young and stupid and drinking a lot more and would love to get into arguments because it feels good to fight with people online. I don't know why. I don't know where the psychology in that comes, other than, I was kind of a broken person back then and I'm slightly less broken now. And I just like how you bring all of this into the story, that it's not just about social media, how all of us follow something, but also just how we do a one-on-one connection and how that connection really isn't there. Because would you really come up to me face to face and say, I'm a dumbass for liking a TV show that went off the air 7 years ago? Probably not. And if you did, I'd think you're a huge asshole if you did it.
But also there's this thing where, because I discovered this a long time ago, because I also wasted my youth just yelling at people. And for anyone in my day, it was in chat rooms. We're talking AOL chat rooms, IRC chat rooms back in the late 90s. And then those migrated to message boards. That was the ecosystem. But as soon as we were on there, it's like you realize, because you can't hear the person's voice and you can't see their face, because in those days, the internet was entirely text because it took 25 minutes to download a photo. Because it was entirely by text, in order to feel like you were being heard, you had to exaggerate. Every emotion, you had to exaggerate it. So this was the era of people you couldn't just say, yeah, I saw that show is kind of disappointing. Or like back in those days would have been like the Star Wars prequels. You couldn't just say, nah, I thought it was kind of corny. It seemed more aimed at kids. It just, I was a little disappointed. It had to be, this is an atrocity. This movie is genocide for Star Wars fans. This is George Lucas physically slapping all of us in the face, because the heightened emotion was like the only way you thought you could be heard. And if you're trying to get somebody to respond to you, if they said something you disagreed with, if you just said, well, I think that's taking it a little too far or whatever, then you would not be heard in the room. So you would have to type in all caps, screw you, you're an idiot, whatever. And you could watch the polarization happen, because the person who you said that to, they're not going to come around to your side. They're going to double down and go even harder to try to upset you and say, well, actually, I think the prequels were better than the original films. If anything, those movies are unwatchable. So now you have to scream even louder, where again, in the normal world, the idea of disagreement is you eventually arrive at some sort of a truth or a consensus or a compromise. Online, everybody involved wants to keep screaming. That's why they're there. They are feeling something. They're in lives where either they are not afforded chances at real meaningful conflict where they can actually make a difference, or if they are in that kind of conflict, they're always losing. But the idea of going online and being able to yell at people about some subject that you deep down know is inconsequential, it's a chance to feel something. It's a chance to feel like you're part of a tribe or part of a fight, a chance to feel like you're part of a real life drama and that you can win or lose. And if you get more people agreeing with you, it means you won, especially on Reddit, where everything you type, there's a little up or down arrow next to it, and popular vote determines whether or not you're right or wrong. So and the ones that are upvoted rise up. So it physically rises higher on the screen. So over time, that medium and that software and the format that it uses trains you in how to talk and how to respond, because you start to get a sense of what will get people engaged, what will get a response, what will get attention. And we've now learned, an entire generation into this, that what gets attention is extreme opinions, even beyond what you actually feel. And I think it is fascinating that these days, when people argue about video games, they have learned that simply saying this game sucks or this video game studio is not good anymore, this video game series is not good anymore, they have politicized it to say these games suck and the series isn't good anymore because the studio has been infiltrated by DEI left-wing Marxist activists. And you now have tied it into like some sort of meaningful real world thing. And there's people out there listening to this who have no idea what I'm talking about. Go into Google and type video game DEI, and you will fall down the worst rabbit hole you've ever fallen into in your life. But it is one where young men all over the world are passionately spending hours and hours and hours a day, not just arguing, but watching endless YouTube videos and listening to endless podcasts. Hours-long shows and streamers who talk about this for 12 straight hours on their streams about the influence of left-wing activists on the video games, and this is why video games are bad these days, and on and on and on, to try to give that some meaning so that they can feel good about, yes, I spent my entire week online complaining about video games, but I wasn't just wasting my time. I was doing activism. I was making the world better.
Posting as praxis, yes. I'm well aware. Twitter loves to believe that it's the bearing witness. Like I have to look at all these disturbing images from Gaza because I'm bearing witness. And it's like, no, you're just mentally breaking yourself in half. You're not doing yourself any good staying inside of this ecosystem and constantly bombarding yourself with it. And the same with the DEI video games. I remember there was, when one of the later Tomb Raiders came out, there are people mad that Lara Croft's boobs weren't big enough. And which is honestly, like, on its surface, a stupid argument that I like you said, I don't really believe that anybody had that thought. Like, maybe they did. Maybe they're like, they made her boobs smaller. But like, whatever. She looks like a normal person. She's not a polygon like on the N64 days. But yet, you know, they have to put that out there. They have to post about it, and they have to be mad about it because that's what gets that engagement. It's being angry is what gets everybody really into continuously posting. And that I believe is the real, like, downfall of social media, is that we are constantly doing something like that. We're constantly having to be mad because mad is what gets us to where we want to go.
Yeah, and I don't know that in terms of what percentage of the population actually gets sucked into this, I think, you know, this book is about a bunch of people who are in a subculture. Like, these are terminally online people. I have family members who, like, rarely go on the internet. So what I try to make clear is that they themselves may not be spending 12 hours a day tweeting about how these days video game women don't have boobs that are big enough. But what happens in those spaces, because among the terminally online on Twitter is every journalist in America, and everybody in government, every CEO is on there. That soil of those people who are terminally online and just constantly obsessing over the weirdest, most obscure subjects, the runoff from that gets into the stream of the normal people. So you can have somebody like Elon Musk, who is a billionaire and is trying to run 3 or 4 different companies, now spends his entire day on Twitter. He's on there day and night, constant tweeting, constant. Every little dumb controversy he weighs in on. He is now basically campaigning with Trump. He's taking the stage with him. He's paying for, you know, ads. He is paying to get voters signed up. So the most terminally online ridiculous argument works its way up until it winds up on the floor of Congress, into the Oval Office and the State of the Union address. So even if you are not in that ecosystem, even if you're not on 4chan, you're not on the places where these weird memes start to bubble up and these weird ideas start to take shape, you have definitely been targeted by the outcome of that once it has made its way into the mainstream, because everybody has, even if you don't recognize it, that there are weird talking points that you're seeing in campaign ads right now that were born as a 4chan rumor. It's just that it got transmogrified and it just took root. And it's like these are laboratories where they're trying to figure out which ideas will become viral, which things will. And generally, they're trying to perfect the thing that upsets people the most. So, you know, in all of the United States, the number of trans women athletes is microscopic. But every campaign ad I'm seeing it's the scourge of trans athletes pushing women out of women's sports. That's something that was born online, where they were hunting for some example that would make people the angriest. And then once they found it, it's like, boom, now it's out in the world for everyone. Now everybody's mad about this, a subject that these people do not care about women's sports at all. They never have. They don't watch them. They have no stake in it. They do not actually think this is a problem, but they found an example, a single example or a single face or personality or image that just catches people. And that's it. That's all you need. It's the thing that makes people yell at each other. And you can now find a lot of discourse dominated by that kind of thing. It's not that the subjects themselves are inconsequential. It's that people focus on the most inconsequential elements because they're not arranging their priorities by what matters the most or what affects the most people, but rather what's the most dramatic, hateful, nasty example that will make everyone the maddest. And so if you can find out there somewhere a single illegal immigrant who's committed a terrible crime you're sifting through trying to find that one example that's really gonna catch people's imagination on fire, and then just talk about it endlessly, because it's all about you're not measuring ideas by how true they are or how universal they are, but what keeps people typing things into their screen, what keeps them staring at their app. And then you have all of these apps are kind of competing with each other, trying to come up with the most addictive version of it. So Facebook has the memes, TikTok has the videos, Twitter has the short form text posts, and they're all trying to see who can come up with the one that's going to suck people in the hardest.
Yeah, everybody has to stare at their own little personal black box of doom that they keep in their pocket. So, Jason, I got about 10 more minutes with you, and I wanted to switch gears a little bit and talk about the Killdozer, because Killdozer is a very prominent feature inside of this book eventually. And I got really excited as I'm reading it because Marv Heire kept being mentioned. And I don't know what it is. I have a love for the Killdozer. And every time I talk about it, people are like, well, Marv Heire was a huge asshole. I understand that. I celebrate the ingenuity of a man to be so angry that he spends 18 months turning a bulldozer into a tank. So what is it for you that you wanted to bring Killdozer in on all of this?
Yeah, and for people who have not read the book, this comes up because there's an FBI agent who's trying to get to the bottom of this situation. And you get the sense at the start that she has the expertise that all of other people don't, but you also get the sense that she has her own biases. Like she also is coming at this, and she is obsessed with Marvin Heire, the Killdozer guy. And she keeps bringing him up as an example of where, from her point of view, all of society has become the Killdozer guy. And for people that don't know the story of the Killdozer, please just Google Killdozer, or even better, Killdozer Reddit. And you will get the story of this guy who had a very bitter land dispute with the city, or he owned like a muffler shop, and there's just some issue with like the access to the shop cut across another piece of property or something like that. It's the kind of thing that would have been boring, but it ultimately cost him a lot of money. And he got so upset that he spent a year and a half putting armor on a bulldozer, and then including gun ports, cameras, everything. Like the armor would resist a bazooka. It was like steel, concrete, and then more steel. And then he went on a rampage and just ran over the businesses and homes of everyone who had wronged him. And he did not care whatsoever if there was anybody in there. He would have flattened people, children, did not care. He was not like warning people, get out of the house. He was just, he at that point didn't care. And then eventually they never stopped him. He eventually shot himself after he got stuck. He got stuck in a basement and shot himself in the head. So the point that she was making is that Marvin Heire was not starving. He was not in mortal danger. She saw him as an aggrieved narcissist, as in someone who could not believe that his ambitions had been thwarted and could not handle it in any kind of a normal, rational adult way. So and again, she brings up other examples, like the guy who did the shooting in Las Vegas, the deadliest mass shooting in American history. To this day, we still don't know his motive, but our best bet is he was upset with how he was being treated by the staff at the casinos there. So he shot hundreds of people, spent months and months and months carefully arranging his life and buying ammunition and figuring out a plan and scouting locations, like dedicated his life. And it's very possible it's because like a waitress was rude to him or wouldn't comp his room or something.
Or he perceived it to be rude.
Right. So her argument is not that nobody in America who's upset with the world has a right to be upset. She rattles off endless examples of things that suck about society as it exists now, but that the most dangerous people and a lot of the mass shooters, when you look at their lives, it seemed like they were doing fine. And the thing that set them off was their girlfriend broke up with them, or their mom was going to kick them out and make them get their own place. Like they were detached from reality in a way where it's not that they were desperate, it's that they were humiliated. And it's like, okay, the whole world has to pay for this. So she's kind of trying to say that we're building a society where with mass media or with social media as it exists now, it's a 24/7 machine that skews people's ideas of the ways in which they're being wrong, that somewhere out there's some guy planning a mass shooting over what has happened to video games, that the girls in the video games don't have boobs that are big enough, because he has been put into this ecosystem where that's the most important thing in the world. And it is a direct assault on him. And he feels like he has meaning and now has a mission. And whether or not his grievance is real is kind of irrelevant. What matters is that from his point of view, he has lost ground. His side has lost. He's been humiliated. His people are making fun of him. And it's like, well, I will show you. And so she kind of saw a society of people who the only difference between them and Marvin Heire is that they don't necessarily have access and the knowledge to build a tank, but they will burn the world down not because of they're in a desperate circumstance. The people who want to burn the world down, who actually have some sort of legitimate grievance, tend to not be the ones who are lashing out. The ones who are lashing out tend to be some of the most comfortable people. And that's why the guy in Las Vegas could afford tens of thousands of dollars worth of assault rifles, where people look at that and it's like, it kind of seemed like he was doing really well. He was a millionaire. Didn't matter. He had been put into a situation in his own brain where he was at war with the world for reasons that are totally inscrutable to everybody outside of it. So she was kind of expanding the Marvin Heire thing, where I think from her point of view, and you can decide whether or not she's being too cynical here, that we're building like an entire ecosystem, an entire social strata of Marvin Heire's, people who are ready to lash out over some grievance that would sound ridiculous to anyone else or to a person, 50 years ago.
Right. And, some of those, maybe people don't have the know-how to create a killdozer, but they have the know-how to spend $600 on a high-powered assault rifle and take it into a grocery store, a mall, or something like that, and get their aggression out that way. And it's kind of the same concept. Like when they do get the shooters and they find a manifesto and they find out what they're mad about things that aren't real, or they're mad about things that they've made up inside of their own head, or they're mad about things that they've read online that other people, who the Charlie Kirks of the world and the Ben Shapiros who have been saying all these things about the immigrants or about abortion or about these things. And you only need one person to say, I'm going to go do something about this. And it's never, I'm going to go knock on doors and try to convince voters. It's, I'm going to get a gun. And of course, the problem is that that's not going to, if you came and knocked on my door, I'm willing to have a conversation with you. If you go into a mall and start shooting, I'm not going to have a conversation with you. You need to either die or go to jail yourself, one or the other. And I don't care what your opinions are, because you've taken them too far at this point. So I do Marv Heire, and ingenuity wise, pretty great. And had the Killdozer actually killed anybody, I think we'd have very different conversations about it. But and I will say also, if you really want to learn about it, go watch the documentary Tread on Netflix. It's really well done and goes into the whole backstory and talks to some of the people who were there that day. So, but yeah, I'm a big fan of the machine, not the man, I guess I'll say.
Well, this is something that I don't know if we made clear. People are unfamiliar with the case. He's regarded as a hero. There's an entire subculture on the internet that love Marvin Hammer. Like the memes are not, oh my gosh, this guy's a maniac. It's wow.
Right. It's become ungovernable. Like Marv Heire, it's like he was dumping sewage into an open pipeline. You can't do that.
Yeah, but the narrative became he stood up to the local government. He stood up to the local businesses. He did what we all dream of doing. Is he just flattened all that. It's such a teenager fantasy of lashing out at a world that seems uncaring, that seems invincible. It seems like you can't make a mark on it. You can't do anything. And the dream of just having this invincible machine, totally bulletproof. There was a moment where the National Guard thought they were going to have to call in an Apache helicopter to take it out with a Hellfire missile, because they had nothing that could stop this thing. They had nothing in their inventory that could stop. Again, he only stopped because he got stuck. He got stuck in a basement of one of the houses he was crushing, and then that was the end of it. But that's kind of the point, is that, and in the story, I will spoil right now, when she tells a second person about it, the guy's like, oh yeah, I loved him. I love Marvin Heire. Because again, that's most of the reaction you get. But she's trying to make a point that that fantasy of lashing out, that it has a secondary effect because of all of the mass shootings that happen, that every mass shooter has a different, I mean, some of them are just crazy. Some think that aliens have taken over government. Some are left wing, some are right wing, some are racist. Some just want a high score. Like, this is one thing you find out when you say, well, why did they choose this target? And what you often find out is it's just the place that had the most people and the least amount of security. Like, well, why did he shoot up a school? Because that's where he thought he could shoot the most people because they're children. And he noticed that they often left the front door open. Like, that's it. And her theory is that whether they know it or not, all of these attacks are attacks on the ability of people to gather in real life in public, which is the one thing that the modern system kind of doesn't want you to do. So it winds up sending this message that the entire media ecosystem loves for you to hear, which is the only safe place for you is at home in front of a screen.
Jason, thank you so much for coming on. The book is I'm Starting to Worry About This Black Box of Doom. I also highly recommend the John Dies at the End series. I'm a big fan of those three crazy kids and their soy sauce. Thank you for coming on. All of Jason's links will be down in the show notes. His link tree will be there. Follow him on TikTok. TikTok is the devil, but you make it decent. You're fun on TikTok. I am trying to be better about TikTok myself, and I use you kind of as a as a template. Like, I can just be a guy that talks. It's all right. But I really appreciate you coming on, man. Like I said, I've been a fan for a long time, and any future books that you have, we'll bring you back on for those too.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.